It's always a tricky one with LinkedIn. How long do you give people? What's polite?
We use 3 minutes where I work, but I don't know if that's a standard or just a guild
Yeah,
minute.
usually use 3 minutes, but
Yeah.
we had typical with LinkedIn. We had about 85 reply yes, and we've got 15 at the moment. But I'm not sure if you guys are the same as me. But every now and then I'll go through the events and I'll go to that one, I'll go to that one, I'll go to that one, and then I don't even look at time zones, and then I forget to put half of them in my calendar. So the numbers are never reliable.
Yeah.
Okay, if you have just joined and you didn't hear the initial message, we have in the chat just a quick poll. So we just want to see where everyone's from, and so we can just get a little bit of an understanding. Right, I'm going to just keep that going. I'm going to have to talk and let people in, but that's fine. All right, we are going to kick off because it is 12:05. I'm just going to share my screen. Rachel. Okay. I'm very good at sharing my screen, but then if I stop sharing, I always forget to reshare it. But I think we should be okay today. Okay, I'm just going to share presenter view. Sorry, I did have all of this set up, and then it does like to change itself a little bit. That's better. Now I can see all of you as well. Okay, so people will still continue to join, but we're just going to kick off because of the time, and we've got a lot to go through, and we're going to try and speak not too fast. So welcome to today's session, everyone. We only have 45 minutes. What I'd, yeah, we've got the Zoom. Okay, so a little bit of admin to kick it off. All of the sessions, and this is number 3 of 4, all of the sessions are neuro-inclusive, which means we try and run them friendly for every brain. So if you don't want to have your camera on, don't have it on. We won't put anyone on the spot with forced engagement. And the presentation itself should be very user-friendly as well, with the fonts and the colors and the sizes and everything like that. Questions are welcome throughout the session. Sarah and I will both monitor the chat. So please just place them in the chat. If you have just joined, there's a short poll in the chat. If you could just fill that out for us, that would be awesome. And this session will be recorded, just to make sure everyone's comfortable with that. All right. Okay. So today we are talking about psychosocial hazards, the new rules in Victoria, which are now aligned to the rest of Australia. But first, if you can read, let me know if you can't read the slide. I'm very happy to read it out. But I'll let you all read the slide to start with. Yeah. So this is just an example of the fact that the new regulations are being treated very seriously by Safe Australia and WorkSafe Victoria, your state, basically. So just in a nutshell, for those who have just joined before we move on, the University of Technology were managing very, very badly, and I'm going to get Sarah to chime in a second, a redundancy and restructure process. The Safe Work New South Wales came along, told them to pause it because of the psychological and mental harm that they were doing. They were given strict controls to follow, so better timelines, more communications, etc. And then it was lifted. There's examples too of others where fines in the hundreds of thousands of dollars have been applied to similar. So Sarah's got a little bit of second-hand experience with this one. Do you want to just share some of what happened, Sarah?
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. Hi, everyone. This was a little bit close to home for me, and it was secondhand, but my dearest and bestest friend, one of her dearest and bestest friends, was a long-term employee at UTS and was indeed involved in this. The implications for her and her colleagues have been really significant, and it was really interesting for me to hear it through the secondhand lens of an impacted loved one to someone who is at the end of this very poorly managed change versus hearing about it or looking at it through the lens that I would have as a change practitioner. You might have read some of the material that made it to the media, but I can confirm that one of the pieces of advice given to these people were go home and wash your smalls. That might give you some stress relief or give you a distraction. And the really interesting thing that stood out to me, apart from that just being some really bad counsel, what they hadn't looked at from where I could see was who their audience was. So the people that were made redundant or were involved in this restructure, a lot of them were academics from the psychiatry and psychology section of the university. So for me, it was a classic example, and I've seen it play out where it feels like they were just following a bouncing ball process as opposed to looking at who are the humans involved and what do they need that might be a little bit different and not so much cookie cutter from what perhaps their partners that they might have had in helping them where they'd done previously. And I can say that the person involved is still really significantly impacted. They've now asked them to extend their time to help the organisation with the transition to the new business model. But that person had some significant time away from the workplace. And they've just generally been really very unwell. So it was a bit of an insight for me as a change practitioner through the lens of a loved one who is impacted around just how significant this was. And I'm pleased that they've paused and that they're back on what sounds to be a right track. But the implications for the employee was certainly really, really quite severe in that case.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for sharing that. And just for those who have just joined, if you have any questions at any stage, pop them in the chat. And I was very remiss. I did not introduce the wonderful Sarah, who is Sarah. We'll have to keep it very brief, but introduce yourself briefly, then I'll introduce myself. I just kind of leapt into it.
No worries at all. So very, very quickly, I've been a change practitioner for coming up to 14 years. I started my journey in change back in QBE when they were embarking on a global transformation program. And then I had the good fortune to join Victoria Police as a non-serving police officer doing change. That was indeed a character shaping period of my career. And then went to Uni Super and now with Guild Insurance. So clearly predominantly in the financial services space. I'm passionate and committed first and foremost to the employee experience. My commitment lies there far more than it does in the traditional change theory. And what gets me up of a morning is constantly supporting and guiding leaders to keep their people front of mind when they're looking at changes. So, yeah, that's a very quick introduction of me.
All right. And myself, I'm Amanda. I'm the founder and lead consultant with a neurodiversity consultancy called Thriving with Neurodiversity. Incredibly passionate about psychological safety, wellbeing in the workplace, and creating safe spaces for all brains. Okay, so we're just going to go through the next few slides pretty quickly because it's the background. So I don't know, Sarah, while I'm doing this, if you want to have a look at the poll and just see where we're at. And if anybody has just recently joined too, there's a poll in the chat. Okay, so in December 2018, there was the Boland Review, which was commissioned by the federal government to review all of the work, health and safety plans that had been initiated just a few years previously. They came back with a few reviews. A lot of them focused around psychological safety. Then some stats came to light in 21-22 from about 3 years previous, which showed that mental health workers' comp claims for mental health had increased by a third, 36%, 37% nearly. And to Sarah's point before, if someone goes off work or sick leave or because of mental stress, they will be off work for a lot longer. The cost of the business is a lot more, and they're less likely to come back than if it was a physical injury. So as of 2023, all the jurisdictions started to implement the new regulations, and then we have 1st of December, Victoria introduced theirs. Now, Victoria's approach is more detailed and demanding, setting a higher bar for compliance compared to the rest of Australia. If you are a national organisation, it is highly recommended that you follow Victoria's regulations with your own little caveats for slightly different work health and safety things around different states. And just to, as we go through this, Sarah and I are focused on giving practical advice. We're obviously not legal experts, and we'll do our best to answer as many questions as we can. So just very quickly, as I mentioned, as the 1st of December, across all of Australia, there is now expectations on employers to protect the mental health of all employees. All employers must manage psychosocial risks with the same rigour as physical safety. And the regulations have been designed that they can and do follow the same process you use for physical safety. So it's the same risk management process you can follow. Organisational change management must be now managed as a risk, which is why we're here. And national employees, as I just mentioned, the benchmark. Now, this graphic and there's WorkSafe Victoria or WorkSafe in your state and Safe Work Australia have everything you need to learn more, roll this out, templates, and it's actually some of the government information sometimes can be a bit hard to follow, but they've set this out really nicely. So I'm going to throw over to Sarah. Sarah, just have to keep this to about 3 minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. And just a quick mention, Amanda, I can't view the poll in the chat for some reason.
Oh, okay. So it's just me. Okay, cool.
Yeah, I think it's you.
Special.
So
all right.
What makes organisational change management a hazard? I think for most of us on the call, we could probably name lots of those really quickly and easily. But the ones that come to mind for me are the elevated stress levels and responses in our people, and that those things can cause psychological and indeed physical injury, especially when it's a frequent occurrence where it's prolonged, or we're combining those elements with other hazards such as high role, job demands, and ambiguity.
Sorry, can I just interrupt? Sorry for 1 second. As Sarah's going through this as well, please feel free to start putting some your own thoughts into the chat, because we'd love to know what you think as well. Sorry, please continue.
We know that the risk is higher when communication or lack of communication is unclear or missing, and timelines and impacts for people are uncertain. That plays a really significant impact on a person's psyche. We've seen and we've probably experienced, and I think there's a good example with the UTS that Amanda shared before, when consultation is limited, the resources are inadequate, and the roles or supervision of change without support, that's when things can become very hazardous. And often in my experience, the supervision of change isn't often at the forefront for organisations. A really quick call out, because I have 3 minutes, is that hazards interact. So when changes that reduce role clarity, when workloads increase, when there's disruption, networks are disrupted, all of these things combine and they become, if you like, a great big moving snowball headed towards someone. And it can cause really a lot greater harm than if there was just a single factor alone. So generally employees can be fairly resilient and live in a state comfortably with ambiguity. But once you combine all of these things together and it's coming at them at pace or with lacking information, it really does pile on and it becomes a really significant trigger for them to start to live out the hazards. And I can see, you've popped a question in there, Amanda. Yeah. Number one hazard of I'd love to hear.
Yeah, please put in your thoughts. We want this to we want everyone to be able to share as much information or as knowledge as possible. And if it helps, you can, what makes poor organizational change management a hazard? Because if you're a change manager, you're probably thinking, well, if we do it properly, etc. So it's be great just to see what everyone thinks. Okay. All right. Just checking. Let me just go back. You covered this just then, Sarah, most of it?
Yeah, I think we did.
Yep. Cool. Awesome. Okay. Um,
There's a question in the chat from Mira as well, if you wanted to get to that one now or circle back.
yeah. No, we will circle back to that one, Mira. And if we can't answer them today, because we have a bit to get through, we will definitely follow up. Afterwards, you'll receive a summary of the pack and all of the Q&A that have been asked. Okay, so there's a couple of key concepts to get our heads around. So a psychosocial hazard is a factor at work that might cause psychological harm. There's lots of psi words in this today. So bullying, excessive workload, low job control, job insecurity, poor support, and now also organizational change management. We might get to this, but I'm just going to cover it now. Within the Victorian rules, there is a hierarchy of controls. So the hierarchy of controls means the higher controls, so how you're going to mitigate this risk. Job design and collaboration are the top two. They're the ones you must turn to first. Training and communications, obviously quite key, but the training should focus on helping people understand the new work design, not resilience training or how to manage a heavy workload. So there is a hierarchy of controls as well. And then we have psychological safety, which is coined by Amy Edmondson in about 1990, I think. So it's a belief that one will not be punished or humiliated for speaking up with ideas, questions, or mistakes. So it encourages discussion. It means people can turn up to work without fear or anxiety or stress. They can, so one is kind of compliance and one is cultural. And we're going to talk about that in a second. Right.
Oh, there's a comment in there from Liz. Number one hazard, maturity of and within the organisation to recognise what changes and how they should execute change.
Yeah. So some of the things that I've been reading around this, and majority of it has come from Safe Australia and WorkSafe Australia, or there's actually a lot of the Australian law firms, of course, are writing quite a bit about this as well. So change leaders are risk leaders. Consultation is a control, not a courtesy. So consultation is risk mitigation, not a courtesy. And I think that's a really key shift. How many on the call? Actually, if you can just put, I can't access the poll while I'm sharing. So can you just throw into the chat a smiley face or any type of emoji if you are a change manager, change lead, etc. So these changes directly impact you. So we can just see how many we've got. All right, so quite a...
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, thank you. That does help. Right. Okay. Who's responsible? Just as it with physical safety regulations, the employer or the organisation does carry that primary legal duty. And then there's officers and senior leaders. Where's that? Okay. And then there's officers and senior leaders who have that due diligence role to make sure that the regulations are being followed, that make sure that the resources are in the right places, etc. Change managers I can't even say the word. Operationalize the change, and employees must take reasonable care to follow instructions, etc. As change managers, there's that crucial enabling role in controlling the psychosocial hazards of organisational change. Embedding the new risk management framework into plans. So there's actually, the recommendations are that you design your change plan, and that there's a part of it that is literally designed as a risk management plan. And it's, while I've been a change manager contractor for many years, I haven't done for a little while though, but the risk part really did depend on the maturity of the organisation, the leaders you're working for, etc. The new regulations now embed risk controls as a key part. There's your personal legal exposure. It depends on whether you are a contractor, a worker, whether you own the company, or whether you're an officer or senior leader. And then as an employee or contractor, all change managers and everyone on the call from Australia have the duties to follow and support the employer's WHS obligations. Right. Yeah, some organisations I worked for don't understand the definition of change. Oh, yeah. So, yeah, you might now be also educating them on psychosocial regulations. All right, where are we going for time? Okay, so Sarah, over to you with some of these organisational levers.
Thank you. So I look at this as a bit of a wish list, and really cognizant that when we're putting these proposals up to our leadership teams, that we have to spend a lot of time convincing them that this is the right approach, but it absolutely is. So putting someone in charge and giving them the time and budget to make these things happen, raising awareness, that is a standard change management tool or practice that we all partake in. Training in leaders and employees to not only lead change, but also to adopt and to become more resilient for change. Some of the language that I'm rejecting more heavily in 2025 is change resistance, because from what I've experienced, employees won't resist a change if they can see that it's being managed really well, that the support that they need is there, and that they're seeing their leaders around them role model what good change implementation looks like. But it is really important to invest that time and effort into leaders and employees. Clarity on roles, targets, actions, timeframes, making it really clear who the owners are of that, setting targets, and tying the actions back to WHS duties. In my experience, when you can link it back to something like a WHS duty, you generally tend to get a bit more attention from leaders, because they certainly, well, hopefully for many, they have a clearer understanding of what that means for them, as opposed to what Liz's earlier comment was, is that some people in organisations, including leaders, don't understand what change is. Making it part of everyday work for people, adding the hazards, making adjustments, and looping feedback into the usual steps that you would take as part of having a HR or a P&C practice, and those OH&S, WHS steps that we have within organisations. And finally, and I think this is really, really key, prepare for stringent reporting. This is no longer we think we did good enough. If we didn't, we'll do a PIR and take learnings. This is now, I don't like to use the L word, but it's legislated, it's law. There's legal commitments on organisations. So that reporting piece for me is really, really key.
And just off the back of that, as part of the new regulations and how it must be managed by as well as you do physical safety, proactively identifying the hazards is a key part of this. And that is one of the things that will be looked at. So sitting down, consulting with your team members, looking at past surveys and engagement surveys, really taking time to understand what the hazards are for your area, because hazards also impact different work types, different work groups, different minorities in different ways. And if you just use the general starter list provided on some of the WorkSafe sites, that is not enough. So proactive is incredibly important. All right, sorry, Sarah, next.
Okay. So, how to successfully implement the new regulations, which, if I can be frank with all of you, I think we've got a bit of a challenge on our hand. Like anything else, when we seek to implement change, it's not lost on me that this is indeed a change that we're implementing, and probably a change that for some people they have very little understanding or awareness or understand the need for it. So teaching practical habits, and habits is a really key word here, getting people to do things repeatedly on repeat so it becomes a part of their day-to-day DNA, ensuring that there's really clear ask of people, not only in just the communications that we release, but in every facet of our interactions with our people. So regular one-on-ones, being brave and using that courage that we all have inherently as change practitioners to call out bias. It can be difficult, it can be challenging, but it really is essential. Making adjustments easy, simple request forms, quick yes or no's, no hoops to jump through, not making it too challenging for people. Build this up with a diverse group of employees. I'd like to think and have the confidence for a lot of organisations that that is really front of mind for them in anything that they do around having diverse representation, but really checking in to see that that's happening will set us up for success. Building psychosocial risk management into the change process. That's something that I've started to think about and will be doing in the new year when we're doing our change impact assessments at Guild, actually having a new criteria there against the standard people, technology, systems process, but asking the stakeholders to think about and pose those probing questions around, does a psychosocial hazard potentially exist as a result of this change? Consulting our employees and HSRs at every stage of the process, and continually reviewing the controls, particularly at key trigger points. So when you're starting to go with a particular go live on it might be a project deliverable or an implementation plan, really make the time and effort to review the controls that are in place to make sure that they're fit for purpose and they're going to get the outcomes that we want for our people and our leaders. That last one there for me is really key into how we successfully implement these. Not lost, like I said earlier, this is another change to implement.
Yeah. And just I've got access to the poll now. So 95% of you are from Australia, but only 20% of you say you have received workplace training or communications about the new psychosocial hazard regulations. Considering everybody on the call should have received them by now because it is now active in every state, methinks there's a bit of a gap. So yeah, that's quite interesting and scary. Okay, so Gabrielle, will change managers be required to be accredited in some way, like work health and safety SMEs? From what I've read, no, because the legal onus is on the organisation and the leaders, etc., to implement all of this. I will double check and I'll get a thorough answer, but first things I'm thinking no. Okay, so core differences very quickly. Traditional change, optimize adoption with comms, training and stakeholder plans. And now this is based off the experience of sole practitioners, contractors thrown into massive change where, there's little support. And so you've got to stick with the basics, comms and training. We all know that change managers do a lot more than that. Psych safety change is redesign work. So pace, sequencing, roles, resourcing is the first thing you look at to prevent harm, and then support with training and information. So success redefined, question mark. Not just on time and on budget, but verified controls, safe leading indicators, and auditable consultation and review points. I don't want to give away one of our slides, but I think it fits quite well here that if you have delivered a successful organisational change plan, you've hit your marks and your objectives, etc., but you have not managed it and you have not followed the due process of the new regulations, then you can still be in trouble. It's all about the process. So something to keep in mind. Now, these changes have only been implemented less than 2 years across Australia. Some places like Victoria, they're very, very new. So there's little research or evidence yet to see apart from some of the big ticket cases where regulators are going in, it's hard to see how this is being adopted, how it's working, etc., because the numbers and stats just aren't there. So I think it's a really important space to follow for the next 6 to 12 months. Okay. I'm all about neuroinclusion. So this is why I think this is so important. So how do you turn compliance into culture? So psychosocial regulations, it's about compliance, it's systematic, it's proactive, it's risk management, identify control, it's documented, right? Psychological safety is very different. It's about culture, leadership style, authenticity and inclusion, and this is the important term, shared belief that the team is safe. So it's not just individual people thinking that, it's a shared belief in the team. You can make mistakes, you can speak up without fear, and you can use your strengths daily. So bridging that gap is where neuroinclusion comes in. All the research and information available identifies that there are minority groups who will be more susceptible to psychological hazards than others, and especially when they overlap. Because identifying a psychosocial hazard is all about the type, the frequency, how long it's impacted the person, and how many others they're being impacted by. So there's older workers, there is groups where English is a second language, there is younger workers, and neuroinclusive people, which I'm going to explain that a bit more, is another group. Now, the reason, obviously I focus on neuroinclusion because it's what I do, but neuroinclusion is intersectional. Anybody can be neurodiverse. Sorry, anybody can be neurodivergent. They can have ADHD, dyslexia, autism, etc. It covers all other minority groups as well. So it's a broad group. So if you apply a neuroinclusive lens, you'll reach more people. So neuroinclusion recognizes and supports all minds and communication styles and includes all the people who think and work differently, like the groups I just mentioned. It looks at differences in people as a positive thing, not deficits or disorders. And the reason to look at all of this with a neuroinclusive lens is you have to proactively identify the hazards, right? So the stuff that makes work hard for neurodivergent people, so patchy support, noisy spaces, microaggressions, etc., are the same hazards employees are expected to spot and fix. So you will naturally increase what you're proactively looking at. Reduce the hazards and inclusion improves. Build inclusions into your processes and the hazards drop. So they work really well together. And global stats show how beneficial it is. All right. How are we going, guys? It's 12:37. We're going at pace. Next time I'm going to make it an hour. 45 minutes. Sarah, is this you or me? This is me. And then, yeah, the next one's you. Okay. So why does it matter? It matters for all the reasons. It matters for all the reasons why we are change managers. Is that we want to support people, enable people, prepare people for changes, reduce the impact of the changes. It's about well-being. You know, it's a psychosocial lens strengthens resilience to disruption as well, because you're letting people turn up and be themselves. You're letting people turn up and know that they can give feedback, know that they can question a change you're implementing if it doesn't seem right for them or their stakeholder groups. So a safer, inclusive culture boosts engagement, performance, retention, and it boosts the inclusion of minority groups, because diversity of thought, you want to capture diversity of thought, because it's just, as with all the statistics around diversity in gender, etc., it's beneficial for companies and for people in general. And of course, there's the lower legal and reputational risk and avoiding heavy fines, which are starting to show up in some of the case studies I've been looking at. I've already answered this one. So Sarah, over to you.
Yes, just I'm having some system challenges, so bear with me for a second. So checking our change, 5 questions to prompt ourselves as change practitioners. Have we identified the psychosocial hazards to that change? I.e., are there workload spikes for individuals? Is there going to be ambiguity for our employees? Is there going to be a sense of job insecurity? And that features and manifests in many different ways. Do we have higher order controls on pace?
Sorry,
Is it
in place.
in place? In place, I did think that's what it was. Workload and role clarity, and it's not just training and comms. Often, and I think this goes back to Liz, your earlier comment, where not many organisations understand change. Certainly, in my career, I've had, well, isn't change just training and some comms? It's far greater than that, and I don't know if that resonates with people on the call. It's certainly just not training and comms, and that L word, legislation or law, tells us now that it's indeed not just training and comms. Can we demonstrate that we have done real consultation and factored that feedback into our plan? And indeed, has it changed our plan? Or have we just looked at the feedback and gone, great to hear what they feel, but not changing anything? That changing in plan is really critical. And again, I think as change practitioners, one of those things we need to get our leaders and execs their heads around, because they may see a change in plan as a distraction or a hurdle, but as things that we really need to do. Do we have really clear review triggers and a way to adjust if issues emerge, and adjust quickly and adjust with the appropriate communications, I would say, in place, so people know why you've made the adjustment, because that can address the ambiguity. And lastly, and I think really importantly, have we considered how this change might affect our marginalised or neurodivergent employees differently? That is something that I've rarely heard in workplaces, and I'd like to credit Amanda for always making sure that it's front of my mind with the work that she does, because indeed the impacts and the changes can be very different, and often that is completely overlooked by organisations, where they just treat a workforce as a homogenous group of individuals that we're all the same and will all react the same. And we know on this call that that's just simply not true. So having that front of mind is just so critical.
All right, 5 minutes to go. Now, I must admit, I thought this group would have questions, there'd be discussions. So I'm not sure whether we've bamboozled you with information that you've just heard for the first time, or you're still going, oh, this doesn't impact me. I would love, I mean, feel free to put your hand up and chat with us as well if you want, or put a thought in the chat. How do you, first thoughts, how do you think this will impact the roles of change managers, but more importantly, what does it mean for companies that don't have change managers? What does it mean for the, I can't remember, I can't think of the word right now, but what does it mean for, is there going to be a sudden need for change managers? Let us know.
I know someone in my current workplace certainly said to me, well, this is a job for life for you, Sarah, with this. I couldn't tell if they were being half sarcastic, truthful, and funny, but I don't know.
You've got your hand up.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, I think it is nice, but not like it's a catch-22 in a way, right? It is nice that it becomes a legislation requirement from our point of view, because we represent people in an organizational context. And I think it's good that yeah, throughout my career, change is always about identify risks. So it can be elevated up from an corporate and from a governance perspective, because they do a lot of annual risk reporting. So then I think the psychosocial risks become part of the reporting, hopefully, in the years to come, in order to be embedded as part of the organizational policy and processes. But I'm curious to know, noting the questions that we have on the slides here, what the definition of a workload spike is, and at what point it would trigger as a psychosocial hazard. The context behind that is I've been working in organizations where change resource come on board, and at a point of time, sometimes it's be before the end of the planned period where change would engagement would end, where lots of my colleagues would take up a change role on top of the BAU workload, and it's very
Yeah.
common across different
Yeah,
organizations.
it is. And I think I'll give a full answer to your question in the notes they send out, but the workload spike and how it's defined is all of these hazards and the how much of a risk they are and how to control or mitigate them is something you discuss with a group of employees, whether it's a representative group, your change agents, the health safety reps, etc. So you will have your baseline of what is comfortable work, and then as you mentioned, people can take on two roles at times and stuff. So that's what the spike refers to. But that is something that's defined by the group that you're with. And if no one sees that as a psychological safety issue, then it doesn't become one. So it's, yeah, I'll put the full answer in there. Just wanted to wrap up quickly. Please add any more questions and comments because I'll share all of them afterwards. This is the third of our 4 sessions. We've got last one next week with Natalie, who wasn't here, but maybe she's gone, where we're going to be looking at psychological safety and neuro-inclusive communication. So basically, how you can make your communications reach as many people as possible through multiple channels. And it's really simple, practical tips that we'll be sharing. So if you're a change manager, I suggest you jump along into that one too, but we will be recording it as well. Issue of confidential change versus open consultation. Good point, Jody. See, there's the regulations and then there's how we interpret them, which is always, I think, kind of the way. So just to wrap up, I will share the pack and the links to the recording with everybody. If you want to have any follow-up chats with myself or Sarah, our details will be in the pack as well. But for now, thank you very much, everybody, for coming along. It was really good to have you here listening and just also taking the conversation and then sharing it, because there seems to be a few big gaps in between what the regulations are and they've just been launched and what actually people on the ground seem to know, including the employers, which is kind of scary. So thank you, everyone. And yeah, we will send everything out. And Sarah, do you want to say anything before we go?
Just thank you, everyone, for your time today. I've loved spending the time together. And Amanda, thank you for being so instrumental in getting this at the forefront for all of us. It's great work that you're doing.
Thank you. All right. Thanks, everybody. See
Thanks,
you later.
See ya.
Thank you.